Hello guys, this is Sonu Satyadas. Today we are going to discuss about the minimal APIs in .NET 6. As everyone knows, .NET 6 is the latest framework from Microsoft and the latest implementation of .NET in open source. And if you see, in .NET they have introduced lots of new features, and one of the new feature is minimal API. So if you are a .NET developer, you must be familiar with the web API development using this API controllers. So we can create a web API project that comes with one or more API controllers. You can create model classes, you can do data binding, you can do data validations, you can do everything. You can do document API documentation, versioning, anything that you can do in a web API application. But while creating microservices, you can create simple minimal APIs with .NET 6, which means you don't need to go and create the API controllers and write actions for API endpoints. You can create very simple web APIs or RESTful services in .NET 6 with the help of minimal APIs. This minimal APIs brings very minimal dependencies. Means in a API controller based application, if you create, it is loaded with a set of dependencies, libraries, which we may use or may not use in our applications. But this minimal APIs brings only relevant dependencies, and whatever else features you need, you can explicitly add them into the project. So you can create this minimal APIs using a very simple syntax. You can use the web application object to define the API endpoints. You can use the map functions for defining this API endpoints, like a map get, map post, map put, and map delete. Every map function takes minimum 2 arguments. First argument is the API endpoint URL or root template, and the second argument is a lambda expression. The lambda expression is acting as an action when you make a request to that API endpoint. You can have parameters to this lambda expressions. You can have dependencies that can be used in that actions. So this concept is inspired from the minimal API concept that is already available in Express.js. If you are a Node.js Express API developer, you can easily understand the syntax of this minimal APIs. If you see, a minimal API application start with a web application object. So you need to create a web application builder object first, and you can register all your dependencies inside that service collection of that builder. Later, you create the web application object using the build method, and then you can define your API actions. That means the map methods. Here you can see an example that is used to return the book object using an ID. This root template takes ID as a parameter in the root, and you can see in the lambda expression we have an ID as well as a book database context object. And using this DB context object, you can query the database and get the data, and then return the result if the book is found. If the book is not found, you can return a result that is not found result. For API documentations, we can still use the Swagger. So for better documentation, you can specify the API response methods or response status codes. We can specify the endpoint name. You can also specify the tags that can be used in the Swagger documentations. While creating this uh, minimal APIs, there are some challenges or limitations that you have, because since it is a minimal API or minimal framework for building your web APIs, it does not provide all the features that you get in the API controllers. For example, if you want to use the action filters, authorization filters, or result filters kind of filters you want to use, you cannot use them in minimal APIs. Similarly, you cannot perform the model validations. Typically, when we receive the model object, we perform the model validation using the model state.isValid, or we can do explicit validation using the try validate model function. But that kind of model validation is not possible in minimal APIs. Similarly, there is a limit in supporting the form binding. So if you want to bind the form data, that is not supported specifically for this form file controls. But yes, in future they may add support for the form binding. There is no support for the OData querying method, and you cannot perform the API versioning in minimal APIs. So if you are building a large scale API services, yes, still you can go and use this controller based REST APIs. But if you want to create a simple minimal APIs, yes, the .NET 6 minimal APIs are the best choice for you. Now we can see how the minimal APIs can be created using Visual Studio. For that, let's open Visual Studio. Let me create a project. So I can either select the ASP.NET Web API project, or I can use ASP.NET Core Empty project to start with. So I'm starting with the ASP.NET Core Empty. Next, I'm going to give the project name as Books API. Next. So I'm selecting the .NET Framework 6, and let's create. So the project has been created, and let's see what is there in the project. So you can see there is a program.cs file, which contains only 4 lines of code. So we are creating a web application class object, and then there is a map-get method, which is a minimal API, and then app.run for starting this application. And we also have an app settings.json that is the typical configuration file for .NET Core. So we can put any kind of application settings or connection strings in this app settings.json file. To start with the minimal API, we are creating a simple model class, and that model class is going to create inside a folder. So I'm going to add a new folder, and let's name it as models. And inside the models folder, I'm creating a new class. Let's call it as book. And this book class is our model class. So let me declare some properties for the book. Let's use the book title, public string. You can say author. Let's use price. And use number of pages. And I can also declare a ISBN field. So let's keep it very simple. So I'm just keeping only 5 attributes: title, author, price, number of pages, and ISBN. I'm not adding any kind of validation, since validation is not directly possible in the minimal APIs. I can also create a DB context class. So to use the DB context class, we need to import some Nougat packages, and also we are going to use the Swagger documentation API or Swagger documentation for this APIs. So we can also install the Swashbuckle Nougat package for the Swagger documentation. So let's go and install all the required Nougat packages. Let's go to manage Nougat packages, and you can search for Microsoft.NDT Framework Core. Let's install the latest version. I can use the SQL Server or any other database for Entity Framework Core, but here I'm going to use the in-memory database. Since it is a demo application, I'm using the in-memory database for demonstrating this. So for that, I'm going to install the Microsoft Entity Framework Core .in-memory Nougat package. So I need to install the Swashbuckle .ASP.NET Core package for the Swagger API documentation. So let's select that and install. So we have installed all the required packages. So now we can go back and create the DB context. So for that, I'm going to use the global using statement. I'm using the Microsoft.NDT Framework Core as the global using statement. So I can go back to my class. Here I can create a class. So here public class book DB context, which is going to inherit from DB context. Now I can create a constructor for this public book DB context. Let's say DB context options of book DB context options, and let's pass it to the base class constructor. And I'm going to create a DB set also as well. As you can see, we have the DB set created. Now we can go back to our program.cs, and here we need to register the services inside the applications object. So for that, first I'm going to use app builder dot services dot add db context. So let's use the book db context. So I can import this model classes also as a global import or global using. So let's configure the in-memory database. So I can specify the database name as booksdb. Now I can also use the Swagger API documentations. So I can say builder.services.add API, add endpoints API Explorer, and also I can use builder.services.add a Swagger. So I can specify the Swagger documentation, Swagger documentation service, and also I can specify the Swagger middleware. So I can say use Swagger, and also I'm going to use the Swagger UI. I can say Swagger /v1 / swagger.json, and also the name books API. Let's say c dot root prefix equal to empty. So here I have this Swagger documentation configured. Let's run and test whether the Swagger page is loading or not. So let me run this. So here you can see the Swagger documentation page is loaded, and you can see the default hello world root is, or API endpoint is displaying here. So I can make a call to this. So here you can see this is giving the default output. So let's go and update the endpoint. So here what I'm going to do is calling this, I'm going to change this mapget option or mapget method, and I'm going to define all my minimal API endpoints here. So yes, we can define all our minimal API endpoints here using this app.mapget, and you can specify the routing pattern like API/books. So if I make a request to this API/books, I need to get my complete list of books. So for that, I can return the books list from the database. To get the books list from the database, I need to inject the booksdb service. So I need to go and inject this bookdb context. So this bookdb context. So it's not books, it's bookdb context. So this bookdb context is a service. So since it is a service, if you want, you can use the attribute like from services. It's not mandatory to use, but yes, if you want, you can use the from services. That's come from the Microsoft.ASP.NET.MVC namespace. So since we are using the latest version of .NET for creating this API endpoints, so it's not necessary to specify this from services attributes. But yes, I'm keeping this for the convenience, and I can use the db dot books dot to list method. We can get the complete list of books using this method. Since we can execute the methods, database operations as asynchronous, I can use or I can convert this method as an async method, and let's call this using the await keyword. So I can say where books equal to await of to list async. So I'm going to call this books dot to list method in an asynchronous way, and this returns the list of books in the database. Now I can return the results. So I can say return the results dot OK, which means it returns the OK result. So this is enough for defining a minimal API. So this will be the root template for the API endpoint. And we have an action method defined here as a lambda method that returns the list of books. But yes, we can also specify the return status code, response status code for this. So we can specify the status codes dot OK status code. That means this method is going to return the HTTP 200 status code that is OK. We can also specify the display name or group name or tag name. So you can also specify with name. With name is the endpoint name that you want to use for this route. That I can say get all books. Then I can say dot with tags. I can say books API. So this is my first minimal API that is using the BooksDB context as a injectable service that produce the list of books in the database. So let's run this. Yes, you can see here is the API slash books endpoint. Let's make a request to that. So you can see there is no primary key defined in the books database. Since we are using this entity framework, so as per the entity framework, we have to specify at least one primary key field. That means it can be there can be a composite key as well. But yes, we have to define a primary key field. In our table, we don't have any primary key field. So if you want to create a primary key field, you can specify the ID and make this as a key column. So you can specify the key attribute on top of this ID attribute. Now you can rerun this application. So let's make a request now. And you can see it returns an empty array as the result. That means currently I don't have any books in my database. So let's go and create another action for adding a new book into this. So after this first minimal API, that is the map get for returning all the books, I can write the next method, map post, for adding in new books. So I'm specifying this endpoint as API/books only. And here I can specify a asynchronous action which takes the book as an argument type. And you can also inject the service. So here, if you want, you can specify from services. And here, book db context. We know that the post action is receiving the model object from the request body. So the .NET 6 automatically takes the minimal API automatically takes the book object from the request body. But still, if you want, you can explicitly specify the from body attribute in front of this book object. So here I can define my method. So here we need to do explicit validation for this book object, because like we do in our controller based REST APIs, we cannot simply use the model state dot is valid method, because the model state is not available here in minimal APIs. So we need to do explicit validation, which I'm not discussing at this point of time. So since we have this book object available, I'm gonna insert this book object into the table, books table. So let's go and write a post action. Let's write await db dot books dot add async, and I can say book checked. Then await db dot save changes async, and we can return the book object. So we can simply return the results dot created. We can specify the URL, that is location URL, as well as the book object. So I'm not including the location header here, so I'm making the empty string there. That means it's not going to add any location header in the response at this point of time. Yeah, after creating this get by ID API, we can update this location attribute or location parameter. So currently I'm leaving it as empty string. Now we can go and add the other parameters, like I'm using this produces method for specifying the status code. Status code dot created I can specify. I can also specify with name, and then I can specify as add a book, that is the name of the endpoint, and say with tags I can specify the same book API. So you can see I have created the post action, and now we can run and test whether this post action is working or not. Let's run the application. Yes, you can see the get as well as the post methods are appearing here. I'm going to try adding a new book object. Let's try adding this. So let's specify the ID as 1. Let's say the title as sample book 1, author name as demo writer, price is 100, number of pages I can say 50, and ISBN value I can say maybe some number. So let me submit this. Yes, you can see the book is added to the table. And let's go and call this get action. Yes, you can see it returns the newly added book. So we can also write some more actions, but before writing those actions, let me tell you one thing, right? If you keep adding these minimal APIs in this program.cs itself, so yes, you can add any number of APIs, map actions directly here. But when you keep adding this methods here, it will increase the complexity of this file. So I recommend to organize this APIs in a better way. We can keep these methods in a separate file, and with the help of extension methods, we can register this APIs to the app object. So that means if I want to create this APIs in a separate file, let me go and add a new folder called APIs. And inside this APIs, I can add a new class. Let me add the class with the name book API extensions. So this I can make as a static class, and inside the static I can register the API endpoints as an extension method to the web application object. So I'm going to write an extension method. So let's give the name as register book APIs, and I can say this web application app. So I'm going to register this to the app object. So this app object is already here, so we can move this code to the extension method. You can see here, now I have moved all my code to this extension method. But here you can see the DB context and the book class is not available here. For making it available in the other class, I can declare this globally here. And also I can use this Microsoft.ASP.NET.MVC that also I can declare as a global import or global namespace. Now if I go back here, you can see all these methods are registered here, and this API, if I want to register, what I need to do is I need to use this namespace. So this namespace I can import here. So I have imported that namespace. Now I can register this here. After this Swagger middleware, I can register this endpoints app.register book APIs. So here I am calling that extension method, and this is going to register all the API actions here. So let's run and check whether it is working as expected. Yes, you can see it's still working as expected. Now we can keep adding the additional methods into this extension method. So we already have this get and post methods. We can also add a get by ID method, that is app.get map get, and we can specify the template URL template as API/book/ID, and ID must be an integer. So I'm using this constraint here, and then I can say async int ID book db context db. So it's not necessary that you have to explicitly specify the from services and the from root attributes, but yes, I'm explicitly specifying here. So the from root and from services attributes are added, and now we can go and find out the book whether it exists or not. So for that I can say where book equal to await db dot books dot find async, and I'm gonna find this book using this primary key ID. So if book is null, then I can say return results dot not found. Else I can say return results dot okay with the book object. And I can also add the additional methods that is required for the documentation. So here I say dot produces. So here we can expect two status codes, either not found, that is 404, or the 200 OK. So I'm adding both status codes. Dot with name. I can say here it is going to be get by ID. So here, if you want, you can explicitly specify the type of this return object, that is a book type. Yes, I have created this API/books/ID template or root template for returning a single book item. So since we have added this root, we can update our created method. So here we can also specify the template. Here I can specify the ID of that particular book. Book.id will be coming here as the parameter. So now we have three methods. Similarly, I can add the additional two methods like the app.map put, where I can specify the API URL template as API/books/ID. I can say it's an integer type, and it takes the parameters like ID, which is coming from a root. Then from the body, I'm gonna return the book object, and from the services, I'm gonna return the DB context object. So let's go and find out the book which we want to update. So I can simply use where pk equal to await db.books.find async, and I can say if book exists, I can say if bk equal to null, I'll simply say it's not found. So return results dot not found, else I can say add this book. So for that, I'm gonna do bk dot title equal to book dot title, bk dot author equal to book dot author, bk dot price equal to book dot price, bk dot isbn equal to book dot isbn, and bk dot number of pages equal to book dot number of pages. So we have added all these fields, and now we can say await db dot save changes async and return results dot ok of that updated book, that is bk. So we have this update method. So I'm going to add this status codes here. Users. The first one is status codes dot not found. Another one can be producers of book object. It returns the OK results dot with name. I'll say update book, and with tag, as you can say, books API. Similarly, I can add the delete method as well. So let me just copy this and update this to map delete, and it takes the ID as the parameter, and there is no need for this book object. And we are also injecting the DB context. So if we find the book in the database, we can delete it. Otherwise, we have to return the not found status code. So we are searching for the book, and if the book is equal to null, we are returning the not found. Otherwise, we can say db.books.remove of bk, and then db.save changes async. And then we can simply return books.no content as the results.no content as the return status. So here, instead of 404, so we are going to use 20 4 not found, sorry, no content, and then we can also specify the not found. And here the method with name is taking the delete book as the parameter. So here we have defined all the API operations, like get all books, add a new book, get a single book, update book, and as well as the delete. So now let's go and run this. Yes, you can see here. Okay, so I have used a different tag name for this. So let me correct it. So here Okay, so here I have used the capital. So let's update all together. Okay, so I think yes. So I'm going to add some books here. Let me add two books. First book with the ID 1, sample book 1, author I can say demo user 1, price is 200, number of pages 1T, and the ISBN number is just some random characters. Let's run. You can see it's inserted the first book. So I'm going to insert one more book here. That is book number 2 with sample book 2, demo user 2, and let's leave the other things as it is and execute. And I can say that book number 2 is added. Let's confirm this by calling this get all books. Here you can see it returns both the books. So I'm going to search for a single book. So let me search for the book number 1, and I can see yes, this is the book object that I have. Now I can try updating a single book. So for that I go to the book method, try it out, specify the ID as 1, and this object here is this. So sample book 1 I can update to demo book 1, and this author I can say demo author, and then let's update this. See, you can see the book is updated. Now let's go and delete a book. So for deleting, I'm going to specify the ID 1 and say execute, and you can see it returns 204, which means no content is returned, but the action is executed successfully. Let's rerun the get all books, and now you can see only a single book, that is a book with ID 2. So that is the minimal API. So we have created a books API very quickly using this minimal API. So what we have done is we have created an extension method for this web application object and registered all the APIs inside this extension method itself, and then called this extension method from the program.cs while running this application. So thanks for watching this. Bye.